Hey guys, what is up? My name is Kaylee. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to wrap up both my Owls Magical Readathon as well as all of the books I read in April. Alright, so in April I took part in the Owls Readathon where I tried to pass all of my owls for the prompts that would bring me to Healer. Now, for any of you guys that don't know, Magical Readathon happens twice a year. First in April you take your owls and you try and fulfill the prompts to get to the career that you would like, to then in September take your newts, which is the next level of wizarding exams, to try and finish out the necessary exams to become the career of your choice. And mine was Healer. So I had 8 prompts that I had to do. There were 12 prompts total. My goal had been to fulfill all 12 prompts regardless of what I needed, and I did just that. So in April I read 12 things and nothing more because I burned out at the end. So let's get into those 12 things. Typically I do graphic novels first and then novels, and I also typically go from least favorite to most favorite. But this time I'm going to do it a little differently, and I'm just going to go through the prompts as they're listed. So it's not in any specific order aside from that. So you're getting everything in disarray, and I'm sorry if you guys like the build up, but as I said, I burnt out and I just did not feel like doing it my usual way. I read 10 novels and 2 graphic novels. I had 2 3 stars, 5 4 stars, and 5 5 stars. That's a pretty good reading month in my opinion. I didn't DNF anything. My TBR changed a lot. I think that in the end, I read 8 of my expected reads and I changed 4 of the prompts, and I did a lot of reorganizing throughout. So like, yay, clap, pat on the back, what have you. I'm proud of myself. And now I'm nervous about the newts, but that's very far away, and I don't know what I signed myself up for. I didn't look in advance because I'm dumb. Okay, let's get into it. The first class was Ancient Ruins, which is a retelling, and for that I read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the very first one, The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. I read it on ebook, and I gave it 4 stars. It is a middle grade novel, which is not my usual. I also read this book for Fantasy-a-thon under the prompt of reading something that's not your normal, middle grade. I gave it 4 stars knowing that I wanted to rate it based on a middle grade level, which means that I didn't necessarily love it enough to give it a full 4 stars, but because of where it falls in the category of age group, I think it deserved a 4 star. That said, I was going to maybe try and read all 5 of the books, and I got about 30% into the second book, like The Sea of Monsters I think it's called, and decided I'm just not going to spend the time doing it because it's out of my typical reading zone and there's just not enough time in the world. So I understand why people absolutely love the series, and if you read it as a young adult slash middle grader, I can see why it means so much to so many people, but I'm 31. It's very simple writing. It's very easily, you can see why things happen to set up the next things, and Percy just does a lot of really dumb and not well thought out things that like an older kid or an adult would do, so that was hard for me as an adult to like read, which is why I'm not going to carry on. But he's 12 and I think he's like 13 in the next one. It's typical of his age. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I love mythology, so that was a lot of fun sprinkled out. Like, Percy doesn't realize he's half god, and then he gets thrown into realizing his dad is a god, and he goes to a camp for God's offsprings, and he doesn't know who his father is, so it's a story of finding out who his father is and then getting entangled in this like almost war that he needs to prevent because of who he is. Very fun, very clever, very cute. 4 star. Next up we have Arithmancy, which is more than one author. I went with Death Note Volume 5 by Tsugumi Oba, and the illustrator is, I never say his name, so Takeshi Obata. So I'm counting that as 2. I think that a lot of people use graphic novels or manga as their 2 authors. It's hard to get 2 authors. This, as it has been, was a 5 star for me. Again, I think I said last month when I read volume 4 that it's starting to drag out a little bit, and I'm glad that we're reaching the end with volume 6, which I'll be reading this month, because I need an end. I love this manga. I think it's clever. I think that the plot is very creative and unique, and I adore the characters. I adore the twists and turns, but it is dragging on a little bit. We're getting more new characters with every volume because lots of people die in this series. I think we're at a point where it needs to wrap it up a little. I've talked about this book ad nauseum, so I won't really give a synopsis except that a death notebook is something that you can write in, and the name, as long as you know what the person looks like, that person will die that is written in the notebook. Shinigamis, death gods, own these notebooks. One gets thrown into the world as we know it, and a high schooler picks it up and starts using it and acting as God, deciding how he wants to shape the world. And obviously, police force and authority do not like that and try and find out who it is behind all of these murders. And the whole series is just them trying to outsmart each other. This high schooler versus the police force. And it gets real convoluted and crazy. But 5 stars, not my favorite volume, but it was better than the last volume. So we'll see how it wraps up. The next class is astronomy, and that is to read a book with the word star in the title, and so I read The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ancrum. I won this book from Kay Ancrum herself. It is signed. So excited to have it in my possession. I did, however, give it a 3-star. We've discussed on this channel before, and I think most people would agree, a 3-star is a solid rating. It was a good book. It just wasn't everything I had anticipated or hoped or wanted. I am an outlier. What else is new? Almost all of my friends on Goodreads that have read this have rated this 4 or 5 stars and loved it. Julie from Pages and Pens absolutely adores it. Mel from Mel to the Any. Madeline from Novel Inc. Destiny from Howling Libraries. If you saw my vlog, I named all those people. They absolutely love this book. I thought it was okay. I think that a lot of what happened in this book, both from the characters' perspectives and the plot progression, didn't make a whole lot of sense. It starts out with the main character is Ryan, and she's asked by a teacher to befriend this new girl, Alexandria. And the way she decides to befriend people, the way she breaks people's guards down, is to be mean and to set like her other friends who are also mean outcasts onto a person to break down their walls. And they're like legit mean. And then this thing happens, and Ryan feels bad for what happens, so she tries to like redeem herself by helping Alexandria out. And it's just everything that happens, especially between the adults and the teenagers in this book, don't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't think it doesn't feel genuine. And the characters' actions throughout each plot point, I didn't buy a whole lot of it. It didn't make sense to me. Also, I went into it thinking it was a sci-fi novel, so I love The Wicker King, and The Wicker King was more fantasy. I thought this would be more sci-fi, but really it's like a contemporary that has to do with space. It's not necessarily sci-fi. I like the formatting, and I always love the pages, and they're quick little chapters. I didn't really understand the headers. If you watch my vlog, like each header has a time: 4 hours, 6 class periods, 18 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 hours and 57 seconds. I don't know the significance. I tried to put it together, and I don't know if there is a significance or if it's just supposed to be like a play on a launch countdown. I'm not really sure. If anyone knows and can fill me in, that would be great. I would like to know. I do like Kay Ancrum's writing style. I like her fast-paced, and I love her fast-paced writing, and I love her ability to take sad topics like abandonment, neglect, depression, anger, and write them into characters without making it very sad. Like, you're not sitting there super sympathetic because these characters own their lives. They own what they do and how they live. And I really respect that in Kay Ancrum's writing. But I wasn't blown away, and I'd be interested in what everyone says, because I think a lot more people are starting to pick this book up and read it, whereas other people I know had like arcs that loved it. So I'm interested to see how this book shakes out for other people. The next class is Care of Magical Creatures, which is to read something with a land animal on the cover, and I finally got to Impromptu Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. For those of you that watch my vlogs, you will know that he is coming to town next week, which I don't know when this will get up, so it might have already passed, but on I believe the 8th, Jay Kristoff will be in town, and I will be going to his signing, so I wanted to read Nevernight and God's Grave, as they're the only ones left that I own that I needed to read before meeting him and having him sign, so I made it work. There's a cat on the cover, there's the land animal. Now I went into Nevernight with very, very high expectations, and I was afraid. I was afraid that I wouldn't like it. I did give it 5 stars, and I said in my blog that it was a soft 5 stars, as in that I enjoyed it. I didn't have a whole lot of complaints about it, but I didn't have a super strong emotional connection. And I think part of that is because I've heard so much about Nevernight for so long that I was like expecting gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. And Nevernight really didn't do that, because it was a lot of, like, it's a revenge story, and Mia, whose parents are killed, trains to be an assassin. And the whole book is like basically her training with a little bit of like backtrack into past childhood. And she is what's called a Darkin, which means that like she and the shadows have a connection in some way. And she's got a little shadow cat that follows her around and eats her fear, and that is why she is like such a ruthless assassin. So the whole story is mostly like a setup of her training and learning about her background and what happened to her to set her on this revenge path. It was really well written. There are footnotes which turn a lot of people off, and also I don't think they're absolutely necessary to read if that's one of the reasons that you're pulled back and not diving into Nevernight. But it adds a richness to the world, and a lot of the humor is in the footnotes. So I enjoyed it. Soft 5 star, but a 5 star nonetheless. So just wait, because this will come back around later in this video. The next class was Charms, which was to read an adult work, and this was the first prompt that I read in April, and I read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I physically read it. I've heard a lot of people say that the audiobook is the only way to go, and I still gave this a full 4 stars. I think that just the writing prompt in and of itself is fine if you can handle the style of it, which is interview format without really like a question answer. It's just people talking. So Daisy, paragraph, Billy, paragraph, Daisy, paragraph, things like that. I found it easy to follow. I thought the characters were rich. Taylor Jenkins Reid has this ability when she writes to make characters feel so real that you expect to be able to look up the characters and learn more about them. The same thing happened in Evelyn Hugo, and it's the same with Daisy Jones and the Six. Like, you think that you can go to Wikipedia and learn more about this band. This book is about a band called the Six, and Daisy Jones, a woman who wants to be famous and musical, and their journey of coming together and writing an album and all the things that come from that and the fallout of that. And it's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which you've probably heard at this point. Almost everyone is talking about this book. I gave it a 4 star and not a 5 star because I didn't really have an emotional reaction to the book, and that's what really brings something to a 5 star for me, is that I get emotionally invested, and when the twists or turns or something big happens within the story, I react like viscerally, and that didn't happen with this. I still enjoyed everything, including the climax of the story, but it was really, really good. I do have the audiobook. It literally just came in, which is terrible timing because the Asian readathon just started, and Taylor Jenkins Reid is not Asian, nor are any of the characters in this book. So I might just let it skip and regardless. I will reread it at some point in the future via audiobook to see what the big buzz is, because it is a full cast and I've heard it's amazing. But a solid 4 star nonetheless. So if you're on the fence about it, give it a shot. Check out the audiobook if you're not sure that the format will work for you. The next class is Defense Against the Dark Arts, which is to read a book that starts with R, and I read The Radleys by Matt Haig. I've owned this for a little while, as well as his book The Humans, and it was the only book that I had on my cart that started with an R. I wasn't really prepared to read it. I thought that maybe it would be like a flop for me, and it ended up being a solid 5 star read. It almost made it to my favorite book of the month, but it was just nudged out at the bitter end, so we'll talk about that book later. But The Radleys is like a contemporary vampire story about a family who has decided to abstain from drinking blood and try and live in society. 2 adults and their 2 children. Their 2 children do not know that they're vampires, but they find out. And there's like a catalyst for why they have to find out, and then it's about like the family trying to deal with their vampiric ways and getting around this event that happened, the catalyst event, and it's satirical, and I thought it was funny. If you've ever read anything by Christopher Moore and enjoyed his writing, you should check this out, because it reminded me very much of it. Christopher Moore is more like in-your-face humor, and this is a lot more subtle humor, but I absolutely loved it, and I want to pick up everything that Matt Haig has ever written, because if it's all as good as this or close to, then I found a new favorite author. Really, really enjoyed this. Next is Divination, and that is a book that is set in the future, and for that I read a graphic novel on Hoopla called Crowded Volume 1, written by Christopher Sebela, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I think graphic novels and manga tend to get about 4 stars for me unless they're like really good or really not good. 4 stars is a very common graphic novel rating for me. This is a story set in the not too distant future where people have found a loophole on a website where you can basically put a hit on somebody, kind of like a Kickstarter or like a GoFundMe, where as long as you get enough people backing this hit, monetarily speaking, it's live and you have like X amount of days for this person to be killed, and literally anyone can kill the person the hit is out on and collect the rewards. So basically everybody in the world has weapons, and if you have this hit put out on you, obviously you're on the run, and you can hire, there's like another website you can go to where you can hire a bodyguard to keep you safe. And so that's what this girl does. She has a hit put out on her and she hires a bodyguard, and it's the adventures of her and her bodyguard trying to keep her alive. If you stay alive for the X amount of days that the campaign runs, then it ends. You cannot be killed without repercussion from the murderer, and that murderer will not get any money, and you can never have a hit put out on you again on this website. So basically you're just trying to get through that time period, except this girl's money is rising rapidly. Most people are in the thousands for their hit, and she starts going in the millions. It's kind of funny. There's definitely diversity rep and queer rep. It's never exclusively stated, but the bodyguard definitely has an ex-girlfriend, and it seems as though the girl who has the hit out against her also identifies as queer because they have some weird flirtatious moments. That was the reason that I didn't give it a 5 stars, because some of their moments don't feel genuine. It just feels like the writer wanted them to have these moments. And you know me and love stories, I'm very particular. So 4 stars for that. It was definitely fun. I will continue reading the series if I can get my hands on it. Hoopla doesn't have any more of the volumes, but I'm sure I can find them from my library. I think it's fun. I haven't really heard much about it, so go ahead and check that one out. Next prompt is Herbology, which is to read a book with plants on the cover, and for that I read The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. I have the UK edition with the sprayed neon pink edges. There are lots of trees in the background to fulfill that prompt. This is about a story of a girl who moves with her mother back to her mother's hometown after the death of her sister, and finds out that the forest that they live by is haunted by a thing, and she is one of 4 founding families that keep that horror at bay. So she's thrust into this world where she has a power and she doesn't really know what the hell is going on, and these other founding families with their kids around her age kind of battle to like see who can help her out. I don't know how else to explain it. But essentially that's it. It's the powers get passed down to the kids, and the kids are responsible for keeping the town safe. Otherwise people die. They go missing in the forest and they die. It was interesting. I definitely think it has grounds for continuing to get better. The debut novel, and I think that that plays into a lot of my cons in this book, which are that I didn't really connect to any of the characters. I didn't feel like they had a whole lot of depth, like it wasn't as rich as it could be. However, I really, really liked the concept of it, and I do like how this story wrapped up, and I do like the slight cliffhanger it ended on. So I am interested in reading the next book when it does release, which I checked in. When I talked about this in my vlog, I wasn't sure if there was going to be more, but there definitely is going to be a second book at least published next year, from what I can tell on Christine's Twitter. So I think it's worth checking out. A lot of people are loving it and are like giving it 5 stars, and I think it just is another one of those things where maybe I'm a slight outlier, but again, it was good, so I'm not saying don't read it. 3 stars, good rating. The next class is History of Magic, which is to read a book that was published 10 or more years ago, and for that I read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I gave this book 4 stars. It's Murakami, so of course I gave it 4 stars. This book has a ton of triggering content. If that's not up your alley, be forewarned that there is a lot of talk of suicide, of depression. There is pedophilia, which I feel like most people that know of Murakami know that somehow that's like a theme in a lot of his books. And a lot of his books are quite dark, and I think that you have to know that you have to be in the right mindset to go into them, because they do wear on a person just a little bit. However, I still love his writing, I love his storytelling. This tends to be an outlier because it's a lot more contemporary reading than the rest of his novels, which end up being a little magical realism sprinkled into a more contemporary setting. This didn't really have any of that at all. It was pretty straightforward. It was kind of a love story, which also isn't really his like usual take, but it's also one of his most famous works if I'm not mistaken. So take that with a grain of salt. It's about a boy named Toru, and he is in like university, but we're also in, I want to say, the late 1940s. So there's like war happening, political upheaval. There's a lot of background stuff in Toru's life that make him the person that he is. But also he's in love with his dead best friend's girlfriend, and it's kind of about their relationship and what happens to them post this friend's death as they get older. That's the best I can say about it. It's really, really good if you like Murakami. The next class was Muggle Studies, which is to read a contemporary, and on a whim, because my audiobook hold for it came in, I read My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyankin Braithwaite, and I loved it, honestly. Like, okay, well, love's a really strong word, but I enjoyed it a lot. I gave it 4 stars. It was like a 3.5, 4 star. It was short, so the audiobook itself was like 4.5 hours long, and I listened to audiobooks on 2 times speed, so it was a really fast read, which was perfect because I was at the end of my owls and I was burning out real hard. So it was good timing, honestly. It's about the main character's sister kills all of her boyfriends, and the main character helps her cover it up. So we're on like a recent murder, and she's trying, that's literally just like a slice of life in that. You get a little bit of the background of their childhood in which they stuck together and why their sisterly bond is so strong. But it's also about like trying to prevent her sister from getting caught from killing all of her exes. It was interesting and weird, and my complaint about it is that I wish there was more, because being so short, you never really got too much about the characters enough to feel for either one of them. Like, I didn't feel sympathy, and I didn't feel like she needed to be caught and convicted either. There was not really any, I just was neutral to the whole thing, which is part of the charm, I guess, but also what prevented it from being a full 5 stars. The writing was fun. I know because I started reading the ebook that the chapters are very short and choppy, and I liked how it was formatted even in the audiobook. And the audiobook was actually very interesting to listen to. I do recommend checking it out, especially if you want like a quick contemporary read. Next is my absolute favorite book of the month, and that I read for the class of Potions, which is the sequel, and that is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. I understand the hype, because this book, I used to read, and I've talked about this before, that like I am a very weepy person since having kids. Like, I cry about almost everything, and lately it's really only Game of Thrones that gets me to that level, and it's been a while since I read a book that made me react like super emotionally. I think maybe the last time was Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book did it. So we pick up from where we left off in Nevernight, and I'm not going to re-go over that since I've already talked about it in this. It goes further from the assassination school into Mia and her life after the events of Nevernight. The last like 50 to 75 pages of this book, I usually, I wouldn't say pride myself, but like usually I can kind of see where a book is going, and I had ideas, and then I was like, I mean, if you watch my vlog, I was like, what the fuck? And then I was like, oh my god. Nothing was as it seemed, and everything was blowing my mind, and I was like, gasping at, like literally out loud gasping at things, and I was choking up. And we always talk about how when we love a book as booktubers, we have like a really hard time speaking on it. We just kind of gush a lot, and when we hate a book or like it less than love, we can talk for like hours, and that's the case. Like, I'm just smiling and thinking about this book, and I can't wait for Dark Dawn and to meet Jay next week or whatever. I don't know, it could be this week or last week depending on when this goes up, but the conclusion, I can't wait. Can't wait. Total 5-star read. And last but not least, for the class of Transfiguration, you had to read a book with red on the cover or sprayed edges, and I read, finally, Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. My copy right there also has sprayed edges. I finally read Muse of Nightmares. I was afraid that I'd waited too long between Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares, but the beginning gives you like a nice quick little synopsis of how Strange the Dreamer ended to get you into Muse of Nightmares. I really enjoyed this. It's a 5-star. Easily. I preferred, I think, Strange the Dreamer over Muse of Nightmares, but I liked where Laini took the story because I wasn't sure at the end of Strange the Dreamer where she could have gone with this, and she definitely pulled in a new kind of storyline that really showed the characters that you know and love from Strange the Dreamer in all their glory, really. And it was a lot of, I won't say fun, but it was an enjoyable read. And I think a very nice conclusion to the duology. We'll see if she writes more, or maybe more in the same world, but I can't give too much of a synopsis because it is a sequel. But Strange the Dreamer is about Laszlo Strange, who's this librarian, trying to find out, like his lifelong goal is to find out the city has lost its name. The City of Weep is what it's been called, but no one can remember what it was actually called because of an event that occurred where everyone just lost the name at once. And he goes to that town to try and figure out what happened. In Strange the Dreamer, it's about the journey and getting there and figuring things out, and then while they're there, that's where Muse of Nightmare takes place. Very lovely. Laini Taylor's writing is something that everyone needs to experience, and absolute 5-star for me. Alright guys, so that is it for me. That is my April/Owls wrap-up. 12 books, finish the prompts, I can move on to the newts in September. Whew, we'll see how that goes. Like if you like this video, subscribe if you are new here and want to see more content from me. All of my social media links are down below. I hope to see you in the next one. Have a happy May. Bye!